Good evening. Welcome. Take a deep breath and let the noise of the day simply fade away. The markets are closed for now. The gas prices have settled. You are safe here. In this quiet archive, we study the code not to fix it, but to understand it, to find peace in the logic. Tonight I have prepared a special collection for you, a journey through the delicate imperfections of our digital world. We have a vast library to explore together, 58 distinct moments, gathered from 36 different protocols. From the halls of real WAGMI to the vaults of Clover and AWA. We will drift through failures of validation, where the gates were simply left unlocked. We will ponder business logic, those silent flaws hidden deep within the design itself. We will see shares inflate, expanding like breath on a cold window. We will watch the swift, quiet shadows of front-running attacks and witness the recursive echo of re-entrancy, where the code calls back to itself, again and again. The ledger is open. The air is still. Let us gently turn the page and begin with our first discovery. Good evening. Close your eyes and drift with me into the quiet, infinite library of decentralized code. Breathe in the logic and breathe out the complexity. Tonight, we examine a vulnerability, one that whispers of trust and how easily it can be misplaced. Let us turn our attention to the Astaria protocol. Imagine a digital vault, standing sturdy and silent. Within its walls, there is a function called Validate Commitment. Its purpose is noble, to ensure that when a lien or a loan is requested, the person receiving the funds actually holds the collateral. It seeks to match the receiver with the owner, a simple handshake of verification. But as we peer closer at the logic, a shadow appears. The code diligently checks if the receiver of the loan is indeed the holder of the collateral. It asks, does the destination match the owner? But it forgets to ask a much simpler, yet critical question. Who is asking? You see, the contract assumed that if the money was going to the right person, the request must have come from them. But this was not true. A stranger, a malicious lender, could call this function. They simply list your address as the receiver and your collateral ID. The contract sees that you own the collateral and you are receiving the funds, so it approves. It never realized you didn't ask for the debt. Suddenly you are burdened with a loan you never wanted. In the best case, you notice, repay it, and lose a small fee. But in the worst case, you sleep. Unbeknownst to you, the interest piles up until your precious collateral is quietly liquidated in the night. To restore peace to the vault, the guardians introduced a stricter rule. Now the contract demands to know the caller's identity. It ensures that the request comes only from the holder or a trusted operator. Consent is verified. The door is locked against uninvited guests. While Astaria learned the importance of consent, our journey is not yet over. Let us turn the page to the Terplayer protocol, where a different danger lurks within the numbers, an overflow that threatens to break the silence. While Astaria wrestled with who held the keys to access control, we now drift towards the Terplayer protocol. Here the problem is not about who enters, but about the mathematics of leaving. Imagine a staking system resting quietly on the chain. It allows users to stake their tokens and even delegate them to others. Naturally, there comes a time to withdraw. The function called withdraw stands ready, promising to return funds to the user, calculating shares from both their own stake and those they have delegated. It seems like a standard accounting procedure. The code iterates through a list of users to calculate how much to pull from each delegation. It uses a specific formula, a ceiling calculation, designed to round up numbers, ensuring no dust is left behind. But here lies the quiet oversight. The caller is included in this list of delegates. By rounding up the withdrawal amount for every delegate, including the user themselves, the sum of the parts becomes greater than the whole. The variable tracking the total delegated amount grows slightly larger than the actual amount requested. And here is where the silence breaks. The contract then tries to calculate the remaining amount by subtracting this inflated total from the original request. Because the total is now larger than the request, the subtraction fails. An integer underflow occurs. The transaction reverts, and the funds remain locked, trapped by a fraction of a number. The solution is gentle. We must exclude the user from the delegation loop, handling their portion separately. By using a floor division, rounding down, and assigning the remainder at the end, the numbers align perfectly once more. The underflow vanishes, and the exit door unlocks. And as we leave the mathematics of Terplayer behind, the Canto identity protocol awaits us. There we will see what happens when someone tries to run faster than you. While Terplayer BVT struggled with numbers overflowing their bounds, we now turn our gaze to the Canto identity protocol. Imagine a digital registry, a place where you create an identity known as a SID NFT. The contract offers a beautiful convenience. In a single fluid motion, you can mint your new identity and immediately attach other tokens to it, like pinning badges onto a newly tailored coat. The code handles this by minting the ID and then looping through a list of instructions you provide, calling an add function to attach your belongings. It feels efficient. You expect to mint ID number 100, so you tell the contract, mint a new ID, and please add my precious sub-tokens to ID number 100. But the blockchain is a river where the current can change. Here is where the shadow falls. An attacker watches the river. They see your intention. Just before your transaction settles, they slip in front of you. They mint ID number 100 for themselves. Your transaction arrives a moment later. It executes faithfully. It mints ID number 101 for you. But remember your instructions? They still say, add my tokens to ID number 100. Because the code trusted your list of instructions rather than the reality of the mint, your transaction takes your precious tokens and attaches them to the attacker's ID. You hold the empty new identity, while they hold your assets. To resolve this discord, the logic was gently tightened. The fix ensures that when you mint, the contract no longer asks where to put the items. It knows. It enforces that you can only add items to the specific identity that was just created in that very breath. No more guessing, no more slipping in between. And as we see how Canto secured these digital names, PoolTogether waits on the horizon to show us the delicate nature of business logic and math. While the Canto identity protocol wrestled with the frantic pace of front-running, we now drift toward the calmer waters of PoolTogether. Here we find the RNG relay auction contract. It is a mechanism of closure. A relayer steps forward to finalize a prize draw, bringing with them a random number to settle the game. It is meant to be a fair exchange, work performed, rewards distributed. The process begins when the function RNG-complete is called. First, it asks the prize pool to close the draw. In this quiet moment, the funds that were waiting, known as the reserve for the open draw, are gently swept into the main reserve. They are moved, they are accounted for. But the code forgets that time has moved forward. When it turns to calculate the reward for the relayer, it looks at the main reserve, which is now full and updated. But then, it adds the open draw reserve to it again. It counts the same water twice. By adding the reserve for open draw to a reserve that already contains those funds, the protocol hallucinates a larger pot of gold. Consequently, the rewards calculated are too high, flowing out more tokens than intended. To restore peace, the fix is beautifully simple. We stop looking for a future that has already arrived. We remove the extra addition. We calculate rewards based only on the current reserve, realizing that it is already whole and nothing more needs to be added. And as we see how PoolTogether corrected its accounting, Gainsnetwork will soon emerge to show us another subtle error in the logic of math. While PoolTogether struggled with the logic of its numbers, we now turn our gaze to Gainsnetwork, where the math becomes even more abstract. Imagine a trader wishing to grow their position. They bring more collateral, hoping to expand their reach within the market. The function validateRequest stands as the gatekeeper. It gently takes the trade details and the input, intending to calculate the new leverage to ensure everything remains safe. But look closely at how this new leverage is derived. When the leverage isn't explicitly updated, the code attempts a calculation. It tries to determine the ratio of the position to the collateral. But here, within the parentheses, is a quiet error. It calculates the numerator using the existing position plus the change, but the scaling is misaligned. By applying the multiplier incorrectly to the position size collateral delta, the code fails to see the true magnitude of the new leverage. It is a distortion of reality. And because this new leverage variable is used later to calculate borrowing fees and opening fees, the error cascades. The fees are calculated wrong, the final position size is misjudged, and the safety check, which ensures the new position is valid, is blinded by the incorrect math. To restore balance, we must correct the formula. We ensure that the calculation considers the total value of the position, properly scaled, against the new collateral amount. The math becomes whole again, and the gatekeeper can see clearly. And as we see how Gainsnetwork realigned its calculations, Subsquid awaits us to show us the dangers of a missing key in access control. While Gainsnetwork struggled with the rigid laws of mathematics, we now float gently toward the Subsquid protocol. Here, the danger is not in the calculation, but in the permission. We find ourselves looking at a function named register token on L2. It is a foundational moment for the contract. It is trying to establish a bridge, to tell the gateway where its twin token lives on the second layer. It prepares the parameters, the gas limits, the costs, waiting to finalize the connection. It is a one-time ritual to link two worlds together. But notice the silence where a guard should be. The function is public, and there is no requirement. No check to see if the caller is the owner. It is wide open to the world. An observer in the dark forest could see the team attempting to register the token and run ahead of them. They could call this function first, setting the L2 address to something incorrect or malicious. Once set, the bridge is broken. The gateway is confused. The path is blocked before the journey even begins. To restore order, we simply need to identify the master. By using the ownable pattern and restricting this registration to only the owner or admin, we ensure that only the true architects can lay the foundation. The door is closed to strangers, and the bridge connects exactly where it should. The bridge is now secure. But as we leave this structural quiet, we approach the chaotic battles of the AI arena, where we will witness the dizzying loops of re-entrancy. While Subsquid grappled with the invisible walls of access control, we now turn our gaze to the digital coliseum of AI arena. Imagine a stadium where digital fighters are born. When a round concludes, the victors step forward to collect their prizes. The contract holds a function called Claim Rewards, a place where new fighter NFTs are minted and bestowed upon the champions. It seems like a simple exchange, a trophy for a battle won. But within this exchange, a loop was waiting to be discovered. You see, when the contract mints the NFT to the winner, it makes an external call to deliver the token. If the winner is a smart contract, this delivery triggers a specific function, on ERC721 received. And here is where the silence is broken. The contract hasn't yet marked the rewards as claimed when it hands over the prize. It is still in the middle of the process. So the malicious winner receiving the token uses that moment of distraction to call Claim Rewards again and again. Like a recursive echo, they mint fighter after fighter, draining the arena of its rewards before the contract ever realizes that it should have stopped at one. To restore order to the stadium, the developers applied a simple, ancient protection. They introduced the non-reentrant modifier. Now the function creates a lock. It ensures that once a claim begins, no one, not even the winner, can enter again until the first reward is fully processed and the books are closed. Peace returns to the arena, and as we leave the fighters to their rest, we drift toward the popcorn protocol, where complex business logic and reward tokens await our gentle inspection. While AI Arena struggled with the restless loops of reentrancy, we now drift toward the open fields of the popcorn protocol. Here, in this quiet landscape, users deploy vaults. Think of these vaults as secure silos, designed to hold assets and connect to staking contracts where rewards gently accumulate over time. It is a system built on flexibility. Any user can deploy a vault and point it toward a staking contract to help the ecosystem grow. But within this flexibility lies a shadow. The protocol assumed that if you created a vault, you would play fair with the staking contract it connected to. But what if you didn't? An attacker, let's call her Alice, steps into the field. She deploys her own vault. But instead of creating a new space, she quietly connects her vault to an existing staking contract, one already filled with rewards funded by others. Because the system checks her credentials as a vault owner, it trusts her. It allows her to call a powerful function, changing the staking reward speeds. And here is where the dam breaks. There were no limits on how fast the rewards could flow. Alice sets the rewards per second to an astronomical number. She manipulates the math, confusing the contract's sense of time, forcing it to believe that years of rewards should be released in a single moment. She deposits a small amount, claims the accelerated rewards, and in the blink of an eye, 99% of the staking contract's balance is drained. The silo is empty. To restore the peace, the boundaries had to be redrawn. The developers introduced a simple but vital rule. A vault creator can no longer attach their vault to just any staking contract. The connection must be authorized. Furthermore, they placed a governor on the flow. The rewards per second are now capped, preventing the torrent that Alice unleashed. And the calculation for when rewards end was corrected to respect the true passage of time. The fields are safe again. The rewards flow gently, drop by drop, as intended. And as we see how Popcorn secured its silos against thieves, the Olympus update awaits us to show us a sandwich attack involving the Oracle, but that is a story for the next moment. While Popcorn wrestled with the quiet complexities of reward tokens and access control, we now turn our gaze to the Olympus protocol, specifically the BL Vault Lido. Imagine a vault designed to hold wrapped staked ether. To know the value of what it holds, it listens to an oracle, a source of truth that periodically updates the price. It seems like a reliable system, a heartbeat of data, pulsing regularly. But here, in the space between beats, lies the oversight. You see, the protocol had attempted to fix a previous issue, but the door wasn't quite shut. The vulnerability lies in the timing. An adversary can watch the oracle, waiting for the moment it is about to speak a new price. This is where the sandwich is made. The attacker sees a mismatch between the pool's current price and the incoming oracle price. They quietly deposit their funds right before the update, and then, the moment the oracle updates the price, they withdraw. By sandwiching this update, entering before and leaving after, they siphon off value from the difference. They take the WST ETH that belongs to the vault, profiting from a momentary gap in reality. It is a theft of timing. The resolution to this fleeting theft is patience. To prevent someone from flashing in and out of the system, we simply ask them to stay. The recommendation is to lock the user into the vault for a minimum amount of time, perhaps 24 hours. By enforcing a waiting period, the sandwich collapses. The attacker can no longer slip in and out within the same block to capture the variance. Time becomes the guardian of value. And as Olympus learns the value of patience, we drift toward Napier, where the very math itself has begun to drift. While Olympus struggled with the chaotic, squeezing pressure of a sandwich attack, we now drift toward the quiet pastures of the Napier protocol. Here we encounter a function named Redeem with YT. It is a simple concept, really. A user wishes to combine their principal tokens and their yield tokens to redeem the underlying asset. It is meant to be a time of harvest, where one collects what has grown over time. The code dutifully calculates accrued in target, which represents the total interest earned by the user's position. It holds this full value, ready to be moved. But look closer at how the harvest is gathered. The function allows an approved spender to trigger this redemption. Now, imagine a stranger who has been granted an allowance of just one single way. With that tiny permission, the stranger calls the function. They redeem that single insignificant way. But the contract, in a moment of excessive generosity, takes the shares redeemed and adds the entire accrued in target. Do you see the tragedy? Because the code did not scale the yield to the amount being redeemed, the full harvest is sent to the adapter. The user's entire yield is drained, triggered by a request for a single dust of a token. To fix this leaking vessel, the developers introduced a sense of proportion. They added a new calculation, accrued proportional. They multiply the total accrued interest by the amount being redeemed and divided by the user's total balance. Now the yield moved matches the tokens burned. If you redeem a fraction, you receive a fraction. The rest remains, safely stored in the unclaimed yields mapping. A fair exchange at last. And as we see how Napier secured its yield, Telcoin prepares to show us the dangers of a checkpoint and a sudden flash loan. While Napier found itself tangled in the complexities of wrong math. We now drift toward the Telcoin protocol, where the vulnerability lies not in the calculation of numbers, but in the manipulation of time. Imagine a staking module, a quiet vault where users lock away their tokens, patiently waiting for rewards to accrue over blocks and blocks of time. The system relies on checkpoints, snapshots of history, to know exactly how much stake a user holds at any given moment. It is designed to reward patience. But here, within the getAtBlock function, there is a subtle oversight. The system assumes that if it sees a balance recorded in the current block, it is a valid, enduring stake. Enter the flash loan. An opportunist can borrow a massive amount of tokens, deposit them into the staking contract, and then, in the very same transaction, withdraw them. Because the checkpoint system allows reading the value from the first checkpoint in the same block, the protocol believes this fleeting, borrowed wealth is real. It sees a mountain of stake, calculates a mountain of rewards, and hands them over. The attacker exits, returning the loan, having risked nothing but gas, leaving the protocol with a deficit, tricked by a momentary illusion of wealth. To restore order to this timeline, the resolution is beautifully simple. We must introduce the concept of patience back into the code. The fix requires that an exit can only happen at least one block after the original stake. By forcing the user to wait for just the turning of a single block, the flash loan becomes useless. Time is once again linear, and the illusion fades. And as Telcoin secures its timeline against the speed of flash loans, we prepare to look at Blueberry update number 3, where oracles and mathematics will once again blur the lines of reality. While Telcoin wrestled with the swift chaos of flash loans and checkpoints, we drift now to a different kind of quiet danger within Blueberry update number 3. Here, we find the stable BPT oracle. An oracle is meant to be a beacon of truth, a quiet observer that tells the protocol exactly what an asset is worth. In this case, it was tasked with valuing balancer pool tokens, carefully weighing the assets to ensure that when a user borrows, their collateral is sufficient. It seems so steady, so reliable. But within the calculation methodology, a discrepancy arose. The way the code valued these stable tokens was optimistic, too optimistic. It began to see value where there was none. Because of this incorrect valuation, the oracle would report a price far higher than reality. Imagine a borrower approaching the protocol. They offer a modest amount of collateral, but the oracle, in its confusion, tells the system it is a fortune. And here is the danger. The borrower can overborrow, draining the protocol of its real assets, leaving behind collateral that simply cannot cover the debt. It is a silent path to insolvency, born not from a hack, but from a misunderstanding of worth. To restore the balance, the fix was not just a line of code, but a change in philosophy. The stable BPT oracles needed a completely new pricing methodology, one that looked at the assets with clear eyes, ensuring that the price returned was the true price, protecting the protocol from the weight of bad debt. And as the oracle learns to speak the truth again, we turn our eyes to the ZAP protocol. where we will see what happens when the math itself simply goes wrong. While the Blueberry protocol struggled with the precision of its mathematical oracles, we now drift gently toward the Zap protocol. Here, numbers also tell a story, specifically a story about what is owed to us when the dust settles. Imagine the end of a private sale period. The excitement has faded, and users step forward to claim their shares. The contract logic tries to be benevolent. It looks at your tax-free allocation, that special limit within which you are safe from fees. If you have paid a tax, the system quietly prepares a refund for you. It wants to return what you are due. The code looks at your share. If your share is small, smaller than your tax-free limit, the contract simply returns the full tax amount. A perfect, simple refund. But consider the user whose share is larger, someone who has exceeded that tax-free threshold. Here is where the calculation loses its way. In this specific branch of logic, the code calculates the refund based only on what is termed left, the unused funds. It multiplies this leftover amount by the tax rate. But do you see what is missing? It forgot to include the tax-free allocation itself in the refund. By focusing only on the unused funds, the protocol unwittingly withholds the tax refund for the allocation that was supposed to be free. The user receives less than they deserve, a quiet loss in the arithmetic. The resolution is a gentle restoration of balance. We simply adjust the formula. Instead of looking only at what is left, we take the leftover amount, and we add the tax-free allocation back into the sum. Then, we apply the tax rate. With this small addition, the math becomes whole again. The refund reflects both the unused funds and the tax-free promise. And as the Zap protocol correctly settles its accounts, the Blueberry update will return to our view, bringing with it the subtle, shifting shadows of read-only re-entrancy. While the Zap protocol struggled with the cold, hard logic of wrong math, we now float gently towards the Blueberry update. Here we find the balancer pair oracle. Its purpose is simple, almost meditative. It seeks to know the true value of a balancer pool token. To find this truth, it looks at the balancer vault and asks two questions. How many tokens rest in the pool? And how many shares or supply exist in the world? It divides the balances by the supply to find the price. But within the balancer vault, time does not move all at once. When a user joins a pool, the vault updates the total supply of shares first. Then, it sends back excess ether to the user. And here is the opening. An attacker can catch this specific moment. They trigger a callback function when they receive that ether. Inside this moment, they ask the oracle for the price. The oracle looks at the vault. It sees the supply has grown, but the token balances, they have not yet updated. They are stuck in the past. A high supply, divided by old, lower balances. The price plummets artificially. And in this brief, manufactured dip, the innocent position is liquidated. To restore peace, we must respect the vault's internal state. The fix is to ensure we do not read the data while the vault is changing. By checking the re-entrancy guard, or using a library to ensure the vault is settled, the illusion fades, and the price remains true. And as the Blueberry Oracle learns to wait for the whole truth, we drift further downstream to real WAGMI number 2, where re-entrancy returns in a different form. While the Blueberry protocol struggled with the illusions of read-only reentrancy and oracle manipulation, we now drift toward real WAGMI, where the danger becomes much more tangible and the consequences far more direct. Imagine a liquidity manager contract. It stands as a clearinghouse designed to manage debts and positions with precision. Within this structure, there is a function named takeover debt. Its purpose is noble, allowing a liquidator to step in, cover a deficit, and restore balance to the system. The process involves a swap on Uniswap v3, exchanging tokens to settle the account. But notice the sequence of events. It is a dance of logic that must be perfectly timed. As the swap occurs, the custom token is transferred. And in that tiny, fleeting moment of transfer, control is handed back to the receiver. The contract is waiting for the swap to finish before it updates its records. It has not yet marked the debt as settled. It has not yet cleared the storage. And so, the attacker, seeing the door left ajar, re-enters. They call takeover debt again. Because the storage, the memory of the contract, has not yet been updated, the contract believes the position is still fully open. It allows the debt to be taken over a second time. The position is duplicated. The vault pays out twice, but the debt remains, a ghost in the machine. The fix is a return to order. The developers apply the non-reentrant modifier to the function. This simple guard acts like a heavy bolt on the door. It ensures that once the process begins, no one else may enter until the work is fully complete and the memory is safely updated. And as real WAGMI secures its vaults against this duplication, we prepare to visit Arcadia, where another reentrancy lurks in the shadows, waiting to be found. While real WAGMI wrestled with the restless echo of reentrancy, we now turn our gaze to the Arcadia protocol, where a similar ghost hides within the swift movement of a flash loan. Imagine a function called flash action. It is designed to be a momentary exchange. The protocol lends assets to a user, allows them to perform a task, perhaps a trade or a swap, and then, before the transaction ends, ensures the debt is covered. It is a standard rhythm: borrow, act, repay. The code trusts that the collateral held in the account is sufficient to keep everything safe. But here, the silence is broken by a specific type of asset, the ERC-777 token. When these tokens are sent to a contract, they knock on the door, triggering a response. And in that brief opening, an attacker can step in. By crafting an account with collateral that sits just barely above the minimum threshold, the attacker initiates this flash action. During the transfer, they use that open door to trigger a liquidation on themselves. And here is the tragedy of the logic. The system looks at the remaining collateral. Because it has dipped below the minimum USD value, the code decides to treat it as nothing at all. It returns a value of 0. Believing the account is empty, the protocol settles the debt in panic, draining the creditor, all because it chose to ignore the small value that was actually there. The remedy comes with a gentle realization. The developers adjusted the settlement logic. Now, instead of dismissing small amounts as 0, the protocol fetches the real collateral value, no matter how small. It acknowledges the truth of what is there, preventing the unhappy flow from draining the pool. And as Arcadia learns to value even the smallest fragments of collateral, perennial V2 awaits us, to whisper secrets about oracles. While Arcadia struggled with the recursive echoes of reentrancy, We now float gently downstream to perennial V2. Here, we find the Keeper Oracle. Think of it as a quiet librarian, dutifully recording the price of assets as time marches forward. It waits for updates, organizing them by their specific version and timestamp. When a price is requested, the Oracle checks the clock. If the request is fresh, within the timeout window, it accepts the new data. Orderly, precise. But let us look closer at the logic inside the commit function. Specifically, what happens when a request has expired. When the block timestamp has drifted past the timeout, the code enters an else block. It knows the request is too old. It knows the data is missing. But instead of marking this version as invalid, it does something curious. It reaches back into history. It takes the price from the previous global version and quietly writes it into the current slot. It disguises the expired moment with an old memory. The market, unaware of this substitution, treats the version as valid. Orders that should have been invalidated remain open. They float on a ghost price, kept alive by a system that refused to admit the data was gone. The resolution comes with acceptance. The developers introduced a validity map alongside the price map. Now, when the Oracle records a committed price, it also records whether that version is truly valid. If a request expires, it is honestly marked as such. No more pretending. And as the timeline in Perennial is restored to truth, we turn our eyes toward the Ajna protocol, where CryptoPunks and the swift shadows of front-running await us next. While Perennial V2 wrestled with the flow of Oracle data, we now drift toward the Ajna protocol, and a vulnerability involving the ancient ancestors of the NFT world. Specifically, we look at CryptoPunks. These digital artifacts come from a time before the ERC 721 standard existed. They do not behave like modern tokens. To move a punk into a pool, one cannot simply transfer it. Instead, a delicate dance occurs. The owner must offer the punk for sale to the pool, and the pool in turn must buy it to take custody. It is a handshake between old code and new. The vulnerability lies in the rhythm of this handshake. The pool's deposit function was designed to finalize the trade. It calls out to the CryptoPunks contract and executes the buy command. But here is the quiet oversight. The pool never checked who actually owned the punk before buying it. Imagine you offer your precious punk to the pool. You are ready to deposit. But a watcher in the dark sees your offer. They rush in, calling the deposit function before you can. Because the pool sees the punk is for sale, it buys it. But because the attacker called the function, the pool credits them with the deposit. Your punk is gone, and the intruder holds the receipt. The resolution brings peace back to the process. The developers added a simple grounding check. Before the pool agrees to buy the punk, it now verifies that the person calling deposit is the actual owner of the token. It ensures that the hand offering the asset is the same hand receiving the credit. And as the punks find safety in this verification, we turn our gaze to the Blueberry protocol, where a confusion of decimals and math awaits us next. While the Ajna protocol struggled with the chaotic timing of allowances and front-running, we now find ourselves drifting into the quiet, precise calculations of Blueberry Update number 3. Deep within the protocol's architecture, the curved Tri-Crypto Oracle sits patiently. Its task is fundamental. It must look at a liquidity provider token and tell the system exactly what it is worth. To keep the lending market stable, This value must be spoken in the universal language of stablecoins, in United States dollars. But code often carries the memories of where it came from. This logic was borrowed from the sentiment protocol, a place where values were measured in ether, not dollars. And so, a legacy remains. The function takes the price and quietly divides it by the price of ETH. Do you see the error? By dividing by ETH, it strips away the dollar value, returning the price in ether instead. The numbers become small, far too small. And because of this misunderstood math, perfectly healthy positions appear to be underwater, leading to liquidations that should never have happened. To heal this, we need only silence that extra step. We remove the division by the ETH price. The oracle is told to stop converting and simply let the true dollar value stand. Balance is restored. But mathematics is a vast ocean, and Blueberry has not yet reached the shore. Another error in the numbers awaits us next. While the previous Blueberry updates struggled with the precision of decimals and oracles, we remain in their garden a little longer to witness a different kind of calculation error. We find ourselves looking at the distribution of rewards, specifically the CVX and Aura tokens within the pool contracts. In this economic design, rewards do not flow in a straight line forever. They face cliffs, moments where the abundance drops and the emission reduces. The code tries to predict how much aura is owed to a user based on these cliffs. The logic seems sound at first glance. It calculates the owed amount based on the idea that the aura hasn't been minted yet. It looks at the horizon and guesses what is coming. But here is the quiet oversight. When a user withdraws, the contract claims aura for everyone. It is a moment of unintended consequence. Because the contract claims the rewards, they are no longer unminted. Yet, the calculation logic doesn't realize this change has happened. It continues to use the formula for unminted tokens. And so, at the end of every cliff, when the math relies on that distinction, the rewards simply vanish. The users lose what they have earned, lost in the gap between the code's expectation and reality. To restore balance, a hybrid approach is introduced. We must teach the contract to remember. When rewards are claimed during a withdrawal, the reward per token is gently cached, preserving the state of what has already been received. Only the truly unminted aura is treated with the old logic. With the rewards now safely calculated and the cliffs navigated without loss, we prepare to look at the harsher reality of liquidation logic in the next chapter of Blueberry. While the previous Blueberry update struggled with wrong math, we remain in their garden a little longer. Here we find another quiet oversight in the Blueberry Bank, one involving the passage of time. Imagine depositing your tokens, like planting seeds in soft earth. When the lend function is called, the system gently records your contribution. It notes down the underlying amount, simply remembering exactly what you put in. It seems like a faithful record. But here is where the logic drifts apart from reality. As time flows, your deposit earns interest. It grows, naturally and quietly. Yet, when the system checks for risk using the getPositionRisk function, it only looks at that old static number. It calculates the liquidation threshold by comparing your borrows against that original amount. It forgets to ask how much the garden has grown. Because it ignores the accrued interest, the system undervalues your position. It thinks you are poorer than you actually are. And in that misunderstanding, a tragedy occurs. Users can be liquidated prematurely, their assets sold off, simply because the code refused to see their true worth. To heal this fracture, we must change how we measure value. Instead of staring at the static deposit, the code should look at the vault shares. By deriving the underlying value from the shares, we capture the interest, the growth, and the truth. The risk calculation becomes accurate once more. And as we leave the quiet miscalculations of Blueberry behind, the shadows of Ditto ETH approach, bringing with them the rush of front-running and liquidation. While the Blueberry protocol wrestled with the intricate logic of liquidation, we now turn our gaze to Ditto ETH. Imagine a system where a financial position, a short record, can be more than just a line in a database. It can be minted into an NFT. It becomes an object, something you can hold, or something you can pass away to someone else. It allows a user to transfer their obligation, handing the short position to a new owner, like passing a baton in the night. But consider a position that has gone sour. The market has turned, and the debt is now dangerous. The protocol relies on liquidators to spot this, to flag the short, and close it down to protect the system. But the owner of this bad debt is watching. Just as the liquidator sends the transaction to flag the short, the owner moves first. In the same block, right before the flag descends, the owner mints the position as an NFT and transfers it to a different address. Because the record has moved, the liquidator's call fails. It reaches out for an ID and an owner that are no longer paired. The transaction reverts. The bad position remains open, unpunished, dodging the liquidation simply by changing hands. It is a game of musical chairs, where the one holding the debt refuses to sit down. To restore order, we introduce a simple rule: restraint. Before a short record can be transferred, we must check its health. We gently ask, is the collateral ratio sufficient? If the position is underwater, it cannot move. It cannot run. It must be healed or liquidated exactly where it stands. And as we see how Ditto ETH learned to anchor its debts, Mosaic Archimedes waits in the distance, ready to show us the stillness of a denial of service. While Ditto ETH struggled against the frantic rush of front-running and liquidation, we now drift toward Mosaic Archimedes, where the danger lies not in speed, but in the quiet movement across the void. Imagine a vault that exists not just in one place, but spans across many different worlds, different chains. To understand its true value, the protocol must take a snapshot. It counts the liquidity provider tokens, or LP tokens, everywhere at once. These are special tokens, capable of traveling over the Layer 0 bridge, moving like ghosts between networks. But consider the nature of a snapshot. It is an attempt to freeze time. Yet on the blockchain, time flows differently on every chain. The vulnerability here is a subtle manipulation of presence. An attacker can step into the space between worlds. As the controller begins to count, the attacker sends their tokens across the bridge. But they do so with a clever trick. They provide a minuscule amount of gas. The tokens enter the bridge and there they wait, suspended in the dark tunnel between chains. They are effectively hidden from the snapshot, or perhaps they move them quickly, arriving on a new chain just before the count begins there. Like someone running behind a photographer to appear in a panoramic photo twice, the attacker artificially inflates the value of the pool. And when the settlement comes, the price is wrong. The vault is drained by a phantom value. The resolution to this complex dance was found in stillness. Rather than building complex tracking systems to watch the bridges, the team chose to simply close them. By disabling the bridging of these LP tokens, the ambiguity vanishes. The tokens must remain where they are planted. The complexity is removed, and the count becomes true once more. And as we see how Mosaic found peace by restricting movement, Astaria waits to show us the heavy silence of denial of service and the fragile nature of access control. While Mosaic Archimedes struggled against the heavy weight of a denial of service, we now turn our gaze to Astaria. Here we find a delicate dance between two contracts, the Vault implementation and the Lien token. They work together to manage loans, represented as liens. Imagine a function called buyout lien. It sits there, patiently waiting for a vault to step in, pay off a debt, and take over a position. It is meant to be a smooth transfer of ownership, a quiet exchange of value between a vault and a borrower. But within this exchange, a shadow lingers. The function relies on parameters passed to it, specifically the lien action buyout struct. It trusts the caller to provide the right details. But trust is a fragile thing in code. Anyone can call into the lien token's buyout function. An observer, watching the mempool, sees the vault preparing to make a move. They can step in first. By copying the message, but quietly changing the receiver to themselves, they bypass the vault's strategy validation completely. The code does not check if the incoming parameters truly belong to the caller. And so, the new lien ID, which was destined for the vault, is minted to the attacker instead. The vault's transaction fails, blocked by this swift interaction. A denial of service, born not of brute force, but of a stolen identity. To restore peace, the logic must be tightened. The fix introduces a series of gentle but firm checks. Before a lien is created, we verify the auction state. We ensure the maximum number of liens hasn't been reached. And crucially, we validate that the refinancing terms are mathematically sound. By ensuring the receiver matches the intent, the path is cleared. The vault can once again operate without fear of interception. And as we see how Astaria secured its liens against the wind, the fog lifts to reveal Morpho, where a pause in business logic awaits our tired eyes. While Astaria wrestled with the heavy gates of access control and high-severity storms, we now drift gently toward the Morpho protocol. Here the waters are calmer, the severity is medium, but the logic requires our quiet attention. Let us imagine the life cycle of a market. Like all things, a market must eventually come to an end. In the Morpho governance contract, this is called deprecation. When the architects decide a pool token has served its purpose, they call a function named setIs. To do this safely, the code imposes a rule. It gently insists that before you close the market, you must first stop the lending. It checks the isBorrowPaused flag. If borrowing has stopped, the market is allowed to rest. It seems logical. But let us look closer at the shadows in the code. There is another actor in this system, the liquidator, the one who cleans up bad debt. The vulnerability lies in a quiet oversight. The code checks if borrowing is paused, but it forgets to ask if liquidation is paused. Do you see the trap? If a market is deprecated, marked as closed, but the isLiquidateBorrowPaused flag is set to true, the system enters a strange limbo. The market is dead, yet the debts within it cannot be cleared. The liquidators are frozen at the gates, unable to perform their duty on a market that no longer officially exists. The remedy proposed was simple. Before allowing deprecation, one should ensure the liquidators are free to move. We should check that "is liquidate borrow paused" is false. We simply want to ensure the house is clean before we lock the doors. However, in this instance, peace was found in the status quo. The team at Morpho acknowledged the finding, but decided to leave the logic as it is, accepting the risk to avoid other complexities. Sometimes, the code remains as it was written, sleeping quietly with its quirks. And as we leave this frozen market state behind, we shall return to Astaria, where another business logic puzzle awaits our tired eyes. While Morpho faced the delicate balance of pause logic, we now turn our gaze to Astaria and the artistic world of NFT auctions. Here, within the collateral token contract, lies a function with a noble purpose. It seeks to generate valid order parameters, ensuring that when art changes hands, the creators receive their due. To do this, the code reaches out to an external royalty engine. It must check the royalties twice. Once for the starting price of the auction, and once for the ending price. And here is where the code makes a subtle distinction. Watch closely. The first call, for the starting price, is wrapped in a gentle embrace, a try-catch block. If the royalty engine fails or reverts here, the contract simply catches the error and moves on, unbothered. It is safe. But the second call stands alone. When checking the ending price, the code calls the exact same function, but without the safety net. It assumes that if the first call worked, the second must also succeed. But in the complex world of external calls, assumptions are dangerous things. If the royalty engine reverts on this second request, perhaps due to the specific price logic, there is no catch block to save it. The entire transaction reverts. The auction is blocked. The resolution is quiet and effective. We simply extend the protection. We wrap the second call in a try-catch block, just like the first. Now, if the engine complains about the ending price, the execution flows into an empty catch block, and the auction continues, peaceful and uninterrupted. And as Astaria secures its auctions against unexpected silence, Morpho returns to show us how liquidations can be frozen in place. While Astaria wrestled with the intricacies of business logic, we now turn our gaze to Morpho. Imagine a system designed to maintain perfect balance. In the architecture of Morpho, which rests upon the foundations of Aave and Compound, there exists a guardian known as the Exit Positions Manager. Its role is intended to be simple and protective. When a user's debt becomes too heavy to carry, the system steps in to liquidate, repaying the loan and retrieving the collateral to restore harmony. The process relies on a specific sequence. To pay the liquidator, Morpho attempts to withdraw the underlying asset, the actual tokens, from the lending pool. It reaches out to the vault, expecting the funds to be there. But what if the pool is dry? You see, if the underlying protocol has no liquidity available, if all the tokens are borrowed out, the withdrawal fails. The liquidation transaction reverts. And in this silence, the bad debt remains, unable to be cleared, simply because the liquidator cannot extract the physical tokens they are owed. The system is paralyzed by a lack of liquidity. A gentle solution was proposed. Instead of demanding the underlying tokens, the system could allow liquidators to seize the claim to those tokens, the A tokens or C tokens directly, like passing a receipt instead of the cash. While this would secure the on-pool balances, Morpho acknowledged the wisdom, but decided to leave the currents as they are for now. And as we accept this lingering risk in the liquidation logic, another chapter of Morpho awaits us, where we will explore the quiet complexities of deposit rewards. While the previous shadow involved a denial of service during liquidation, we remain within the quiet halls of the Morpho protocol, turning our gaze to a matter of accounting and unintended consequences. Consider the function known as claim to treasury. It is a housekeeper of sorts. Its purpose is simple and noble: to gather the underlying tokens accumulated from peer-to-peer matches, the protocol's earned reserves, and gently sweep them into the treasury. It expects to move only what belongs to the protocol. But here, we find a conflict of identity. You see, the compound protocol pays out rewards in its own token, comp. But comp is also a valid market within the system. Imagine the treasury decides to sweep the reserves for the comp market. The function looks at the contract's balance. It sees tokens, but it cannot tell the difference between the reserves earned from lending and the rewards earned by users. It takes it all. An observer, perhaps someone watching the mempool, could see a treasury claim approaching. They could quickly claim rewards on behalf of Morpho, filling the contract with user rewards just moments before the treasury sweeps through. The result is that the treasury unknowingly walks away with the user's bounty. In the quiet aftermath, the developers contemplated a separation, building a wall between the reserve and the reward. Yet, weighing the complexity of the change against the rarity of the event, they chose to leave the logic as it stands, a known ripple in the water. And as we accept this calculated risk, we prepare to uncover a different kind of flaw in the next chapter of Morpho, where business logic drifts further from reality. We linger a moment longer within the halls of Morpho. While we just observed how rewards flow like water, we must now turn our gaze to the deeper currents of liquidity computation. Deep within the utilities contract there exists a function, is liquidatable. It quietly iterates over every market a user has entered, trying to determine if their position remains healthy. It is a guardian, checking the weights and balances of collateral against debt. To calculate the debt, the code performs a multiplication. It takes the user's balance on the pool and multiplies it by the last pool indexes. But notice the word last. It is using a cached value, a memory of the index, and here is where the drift occurs. While Morpho updates the indexes for the specific assets being borrowed or used as collateral, it does not refresh the others. This means the calculation relies on stale data. It is looking at an old photograph of the market, rather than the market itself. Because of this, Morpho might dream that a user is safe, while in the waking reality of Compound, that same user is ready to be liquidated. The two protocols are no longer in harmony. The fix is a gentle return to the present. Instead of relying on the internal cached memory, the recommendation is to consult Compound's live borrow index. By using the true index, which may have grown while Morpho wasn't looking, the calculation aligns with reality, and the liquidation logic becomes sound once more. And as the indexes align and the waters of Morpho settle, we prepare to step into the rigid corridors of Clover, where a question of access control awaits us. While Morpho wrestled with the complex flow of its business logic, we drift now toward a different kind of quiet oversight within the Clover protocol. Imagine, if you will, an order book, quietly matching trades day and night. With every exchange, a small fee is set aside, gathering like dust in a sunbeam. These fees wait patiently in the contract, destined for two places: the market host and the DAO treasury. To move them, there is a function simply named collect fees. It sounds peaceful enough, but let us look closer at the gatekeeper. Inside this function, there sat a strict instruction, a requirement that the message sender must equal the host. It seems like a reasonable guard, doesn't it? Limiting power to the creator. But in the world of decentralized code, strictness can become a cage. By demanding that only the host can trigger the payout, the contract created a single point of failure. Think of the risk. If the host's key were lost, or if they simply stopped watching, the fees would be trapped forever. Even the DAO's share would sit there, visible, but untouchable, locked behind a door that only one ghost could open. The realization comes gently. Since the destination of the funds is hard-coded, fixed securely to the host and the treasury addresses, it does not matter who turns the key. It only matters that the door is opened. And so, the resolution is a letting go. The strict requirement is removed. Now anyone, a keeper bot, a user, or the wind itself, can call the function. The funds flow safely to their rightful homes, no longer waiting on a single master. And as the fees flow freely in Clover, we prepare to return to Morpho, where a question of validation and logic awaits us. While Clover wrestled with the heavy keys of access control, we now turn our gaze to the reflective waters of Morpho. Imagine a protocol that seeks to be a mirror. Morpho aims to mimic the logic of Compound, the giant beneath it, in a perfect one-to-one harmony. It is designed to respect the rules of the underlying world, executing user actions with the same care and sanity checks as the protocol it rests upon. It is a symbiotic dance, meant to move exactly as the partner moves. But even in a perfect reflection, details can be lost. Deep within Compound's architecture, there are specific safeguards. There is a mechanism called the borrow cap, which prevents new debt if a threshold is reached. There is a guardian, waiting to see if a market is paused or if it has quietly become deprecated. But Morpho does not look for these specific signals. It allows the borrow to proceed, bypassing the check for the cap and ignoring the guardian's pause. It is a subtle divergence. The mirror image is not quite identical to the source. A quiet oversight where the layer above assumes too much freedom from the layer below. The resolution here is philosophical as much as it is technical. The team realized that to fetch every single check, to ask the pool for permission at every turn, is heavy. It consumes too much gas. So, they chose to acknowledge the difference. They document the divergence, accepting that sometimes, for the sake of efficiency, the mirror cannot be flawless. And as we let the ripples settle on Morpho's design, Astaria awaits to show us the intricate puzzles of business logic. While Morpho struggled with the strict rules of validation logic, we now drift toward Astaria, where the trouble lies not in the rules themselves, but in the passage of time. Imagine a public vault, a digital vessel holding promises in the form of liens. These promises operate in cycles, known as epochs. Like the turning of a page, one epoch must end for the next to begin. The system patiently tracks these liens, waiting for them to be paid, bought out, or, if their time runs out, liquidated. It is a rhythm of opening and closing. But here, in the quiet logic of the process epoch function, a blockage forms. You see, The system believes that if a lien is technically open, the epoch cannot close. It waits for a resolution. But what if a lien expires and silence follows? If the clock runs out on a loan but no one steps forward to manually call the liquidate function, the system's internal flag, known as liens open for epoch, remains true. The code checks this flag, sees the open door, and refuses to turn the page. The entire processing of the epoch simply halts. It reverts, frozen in time, waiting for a liquidation call that hasn't come. To break this silence, the solution requires vigilance. Astaria and Spearbit acknowledged that code alone cannot always watch the clock. They established a monitoring solution, a watchful guardian to ensure the liquidate endpoint is called the moment a lien expires. By ensuring the action is taken without delay, the flow of epochs is restored. And as we leave the frozen epochs of Astaria behind, we prepare to return to Morpho, where a different kind of obstruction awaits, one of denial. And racing ahead, while Astaria wrestled with the intricacies of its business logic, we now turn our gaze to Morpho, a protocol designed to match lenders and borrowers, like partners in a slow, algorithmic dance. In the heart of this system, liquidity sits in a queue, a structure known to us as a doubly linked list. It waits patiently for a borrower to arrive. Ideally, the lender at the front, the head of the list, should be the first to find a match. It feels like the natural order of things. But in the dark forest of the mempool, eyes are watching. A frontrunner sees a borrower approaching, looking for, let's say, 100 units of an asset. Swiftly, before the block is mined, the frontrunner steps in. They supply 101 units. By offering just slightly more than necessary, they slip to the front of the line. The protocol, seeing the liquidity, matches the borrower with the frontrunner instantly. The honest lender, who waited so patiently at the head of the list, is left standing alone, unmatched. The attacker then gently withdraws the single unit left over, having successfully captured the yield that belonged to another. The developers looked at this quiet theft and paused. To force a strict first-in, first-out system would be noble, but it would open the doors to a storm, a denial of service attack that could clog the system entirely. And so, a decision was made. They accepted that a front-runner with capital is functionally no different than a whale swimming to the front. Sometimes, to keep the waters calm, we must accept the currents we cannot change. And as we accept the compromises Morpho must make to stay afloat, the winds carry us toward Clover, where another puzzle of logic awaits our tired eyes. While Morpho faced the chaotic rush of front-running, we now turn our gaze to the quiet efficiency of Clover. Imagine a busy marketplace, where helpful spirits, or bots, wish to tidy up. The order book contract invites these operators to perform a service. It allows them to take a long list of orders and claim them on behalf of users, finalizing transactions and earning a small bounty for their trouble. It is designed to be a batch of tasks, completed in a single, elegant motion. But within this loop lies a rigid expectation. The code iterates through the list of order keys, calling the internal claim function for each one. However, it does not account for the unpredictable nature of the world. Consider the clash. Two bots might reach for the same order at the exact same moment, or perhaps the owner of the order decides to cancel it just as the bot arrives. In the original code, If a single order in the list fails to be claimed, the entire transaction reverts. All the work is lost. Because the code could not tolerate a single impossibility, it rejected the entire batch. It is a fragility that prevents the system from functioning smoothly. The solution is one of acceptance. The fix teaches the contract to be more forgiving. Instead of reverting when an order cannot be claimed, the code now simply skips it. It checks if the claim is valid, and if not, it moves gently to the next item in the list. It flows around the obstacle, ensuring the remaining work is finished. And as we see how Clover learned to flow like water, we prepare to return to Morpho, where the logic of business holds yet another secret. While Clover wrestled with the intricacies of its business logic, we now turn our gaze to Morpho, specifically within its compound implementation. Here we find a function named isLiquidatable. It acts as a silent sentry, tasked with a simple, crucial question. Has a user's debt grown too heavy for their collateral to bear? To answer this, the code gently loops through every token the user has supplied or borrowed, summing up the values to see where the balance lies. But as the function walks through these tokens, it forgets to check the time. You see, the peer-to-peer indexes, the markers that track how interest accrues, are not updated before this check begins. They are stale. If the majority of a user's balance sits within the peer-to-peer system, the function is calculating their health based on the past, not the present. It is looking at a snapshot of a world that has already moved on. Without updating these indexes first, the liquidation check might return a result that simply isn't true. The remedy, found in the Aave implementation, is to always ensure the indexes are fresh, to call update P2P indexes before any logic begins. A simple act of synchronization. Yet in this story, the code remains as it is. The developers weighed the cost of gas against the risk and chose to prioritize efficiency. Sometimes the vulnerability is a known shadow, allowed to stay to keep the machine running light. And as we reflect on this choice between precision and cost in Morpho, Protocol D waits to show us another nuance of business logic. While Morpho struggled with the subtle intricacies of business logic, we now drift toward a protocol simply known as D. Here, in the quiet integration with the GMX v2 trading platform, we find a module with a simple desire. It wishes to update an order. Imagine a function called GMX v2 update. It patiently waits for the executor to adjust the size of a position, or perhaps the acceptable price. It is meant to be a smooth, efficient adjustment, avoiding the noise of closing a position entirely, only to open it again. But as we look closer at the code, we see a failure of communication. The contract attempts to call the update order function on the exchange router. It speaks with confidence, passing the key, the size delta, and the prices. But notice the interface definition sitting quietly at the top of the file. It is incomplete. The definition in the code does not match the reality of the GMX router. It is missing parameters. And so, when the call is made, it falls into the void. Because the function signature is incorrect, the transaction reverts. Every single time. The order cannot be updated. The system is forced to take the long, expensive road of closing and reopening positions, wasting gas, wasting time. The resolution comes gently. We simply need to listen to what the router actually requires. By changing the interface to include the missing parameters, the call finally connects. The lock turns, and the order is updated in silence. And as we leave this restored interface behind, we turn our gaze toward Party DAO, where a re-entrancy vulnerability waits to be understood. While Protocol D wrestled with the tangled threads of business logic, we now drift gently towards Party DAO, where the vulnerability hides not in the logic itself, but in a lock that wasn't quite shut. Imagine a gathering, a party on the blockchain. Sometimes a guest wishes to leave, taking their share of the treasury with them. In the code, this is known as the rage quit function. It allows a member to burn their NFT, collect their tokens, and step out into the night. To keep the vault safe while the door is open, the contract attempts to build a wall. It takes a variable, the rage quit timestamp, and deletes it, setting it to 0. The logic is simple. If the timestamp is 0, the door is locked. No one should be able to enter the function again until the first person has finished leaving and the timestamp is restored. It seems like a sound strategy. A temporary silence to prevent the chaos of re-entrancy. But listen closely to the implementation. The contract assumes that setting the timestamp to 0 is enough. But it forgot about the hosts. You see, a privileged user, a host, has the power to call a function named setRageQuit. If the contract makes an external call to send tokens, and control is handed over to a malicious host, they can simply call setRageQuit right in the middle of the process. They change that 0 back to a valid time. The guard, seeing a valid timestamp, steps aside, and the door swings open again. The attacker re-enters the function, draining the funds before the first execution ever finishes restoring the lock. To restore peace to the party, the solution is one of absolute certainty. We should not rely on a variable that can be changed from the outside. Instead, we implement a dedicated re-entrancy guard, a simple, unchangeable flag like the one from OpenZeppelin. Or, if we must use the timestamp, we set it not to 0, but to a permanent disabled state during the withdrawal, a state that refuses to be overwritten, no matter what the host tries to say. And as the party guests find a secure passage out, we look ahead to Caviar, where we will uncover a quiet error in the mathematics of royalties. While Party DAO wrestled with the recursive chaos of re-entrancy, we now drift toward the Caviar protocol. Imagine, if you will, a private pool where digital artifacts, non-fungible tokens, are exchanged. In this quiet marketplace, a buyer might purchase several items at once, a bundle of distinct treasures. And the contract, like a dutiful accountant, has a responsibility to ensure the original creators receive their fair share, the royalties. It consults the ledger, ready to distribute the funds. But here, in the mathematics of the sale, a gentle oversight occurs. When calculating the royalties for a bundle of NFTs, the code looks at the total sale price and simply divides it equally among the number of tokens sold. It assumes that every item in the basket holds the exact same value, but value is rarely uniform. Imagine a rare, expensive masterpiece sold alongside a common, inexpensive token. The code blurs their distinct values into a single average. It treats the expensive piece as cheaper than it is, and the cheap piece as more valuable. If these tokens owe royalties to different creators, the distribution becomes unfair. The creator of the masterpiece receives less than they are owed, lost in the averaging of the math. The creators of the protocol noted that often the royalty recipient is the same for the whole collection, so the numbers balance out in the end. A pragmatic view. Yet the standards of our world, the EIP definitions, remind us that each token is unique and may have its own specific path and price. To truly fix this, one must calculate royalties by weighing each token's price individually relative to the whole, ensuring that precision is not lost to convenience. And as we see how Caviar navigated the nuances of fair distribution, the HATS protocol begins to emerge from the mist, ready to show us another form of re-entrancy. While Caviar struggled with the precise nature of royalty mathematics, we now drift toward the HATS protocol. Here we find a contract known as the HATS signer gate. It acts as a sentinel, a guard standing watch over a Gnosis safe. Its duty is simple and noble: to ensure that signatures are counted and the threshold is respected before any transaction is executed. It is the gatekeeper of the vault. To protect against the chaos of re-entrancy, where a function calls back into itself before finishing, the guard employs a simple counter. In the function called check transaction, it gently increments this counter to mark that a process has begun. And in check after execution, it decrements it back down, returning the state to rest. But here lies the quiet oversight. The developers intended for the contract to fail if the counter ever dropped below 0. But consider the attacker who re-enters the gate. They do not subtract, they add. The counter goes from 1 to 2. There is no underflow. The check passes silently. In this hidden, nested state, the attacker can rewrite the rules of the safe. They might lower the threshold or remove the guard entirely, executing malicious commands before resetting the lock as if nothing ever happened. The resolution comes from a beautiful inversion of logic. Instead of starting at 0 and climbing up, we start at 1. Now the guard subtracts from the counter when a transaction begins. If a recursive call tries to slip in, it attempts to subtract from 0, and the mathematics of the contract refuse. An underflow occurs, and the transaction is reverted. And as the HATS protocol secures its gates against re-entrancy, we prepare to look at Blueberry, where the dangers of slippage and front-running await us. While the HATS protocol struggled with the restless echoes of re-entrancy, we now turn our gaze to the Blueberry protocol, where the danger lies not in repetition, but in trust. Let us drift into the Ichivault spell contract. It sounds magical, doesn't it? Its purpose is simple. When a user wishes to leave, to withdraw their position, the spell begins an unwinding process. To return what was borrowed, the contract must perform a trade, swapping one token for another on Uniswap v3. It is a moment of exchange. The code prepares the swap call. It checks if the amount to swap is greater than 0, and then it reaches out to the pool. But here, in the silence of the transaction, there is a quiet oversight. Listen closely to the parameters passed to the swap function. Specifically, the square root price limit. The code sets this limit to the absolute maximum, or the absolute minimum possible values. In human terms, the contract is telling the market, I will accept any price you give me, no matter how terrible. It has no slippage protection. In the dark forest of the mempool, eyes are watching. An MEV bot can see this trusting transaction coming. They can slip in front of it, pushing the price wildly out of balance, let the user's trade execute at a loss, and then trade back, pocketing the difference. The user, expecting their funds, is left with only dust. To heal this wound, we must teach the contract to be firm. The resolution is to require a slippage parameter from the user, a way for them to say, I will accept no less than this. Or perhaps, we could gently consult the existing Oracle system to estimate a fair price before trading. By defining our boundaries, the sandwich attack fails, and the value is preserved. But even as we fix the trading logic in Blueberry, we must wonder about the data guiding those decisions. Next, we shall see what happens when the logic goes missing and the prices grow stale. While the Blueberry protocol wrestled with the restless tides of slippage and front-running, we remain within its digital gardens a little longer. We turn our attention now to the Chainlink Adapter Oracle. Think of this contract as a quiet observer, a watchman tasked with looking out at the vast market and asking a single, simple question. What is the value of this token? The code, in its original state, seems diligent. It reaches out to the registry, calling for the latest round data. It receives the price, and it even checks the clock, ensuring the update isn't too old by comparing the timestamp against a maximum delay. It feels secure. It feels timely. But here, in the silence between the lines, lies a quiet oversight. The contract assumes that because the Oracle answered, the answer must be valid. It accepts the data without looking it in the eye. It never asks if the price is actually positive. It never verifies if the round of data collection is truly complete. Imagine if the Oracle malfunctioned and whispered a price of 0, or if it returned a stale, incomplete round that the time check missed. The protocol would blindly accept this hollowness as truth, potentially valuing a treasure at nothing at all. To restore harmony to this system, the resolution is gentle but firm. We introduce a series of simple questions before accepting the data. We add requirements. We gently insist that the answer must be strictly greater than 0. We ensure the round ID and timestamps align, proving the data is fresh and the round is complete. By adding these checks, require answer greater than 0, the contract no longer just listens, it understands. It ensures the voice from the outside world is speaking clearly and truthfully. And as we see how Blueberry learned to validate the voice of the Oracle, we prepare to go deeper still. For the next chapter will show us that even when the Oracle speaks, we must be careful which questions we ask. While the Blueberry protocol wrestled with the concept of time and stale prices, we find another quiet oversight in the very same protocol, hiding within the Chainlink Adapter Oracle. Let us look at how this Oracle seeks the truth. It reaches out to the Chainlink registry, asking for the latest round data to value an asset. It trusts the aggregator to report the world as it is. The aggregator, however, has a built-in safety mechanism, a flaw known as the minimum answer. But consider what happens during a crash. Imagine a token plummeting, falling like a stone into deep water. If the true value falls below that safety flaw, the aggregator stops following it down. It freezes. It continues to report the minimum price, pretending the asset still holds value, even when it is nearly worthless. In this silence, the danger blooms. Because the protocol believes the asset is still valuable, it allows users to borrow against it at an inflated rate. They take out loans based on a ghost, leaving the protocol holding nothing but dust and bad debt. The resolution comes with a moment of verification. We simply ask the Oracle to look at the boundaries. When the answer returns, we check if it touches the minimum or maximum limits. If the price is sitting exactly on that safety floor, we revert. We choose to pause the system rather than accept a value that might be an illusion. And as the Blueberry protocol secures its vision against the crash, We see movement in the distance with Telcoin, where someone is preparing to run ahead of the trade. While Blueberry wrestled with the silence of Chainlink oracles, we now turn our gaze to the Telcoin update. Here, in the quiet corridors of a stablecoin contract, there exists a mechanism of justice, the ability to blacklist. It is a function designed to freeze the assets of those who would do harm, stopping them in their tracks. It is called, quite simply, add blacklist. But consider the nature of the blockchain. It is a transparent river. When the administrator sends the command to ban a user, that command floats in the mempool, visible to all, waiting to be mined. And this is where the shadow moves. The malicious user is watching. They see the transaction coming to lock them out, and so they engage in a race. By submitting their own transaction with a higher gas price, a bribe to the miners if you will, they can move their funds just seconds before the ban takes effect. It is a classic front run. The lock clicks shut, but the room is already empty. The vulnerability lies not in the code's logic, but in the time it takes to execute. To restore order, the resolution requires a change in perspective. The developers looked to the staking module for wisdom. Instead of relying on a race to capture funds, the mechanism was tightened. The fix ensures that the blacklist is not just a reaction, but a fundamental state. By aligning the withdrawal logic, the ability to flee is removed. Speed no longer matters when the door itself has vanished. The funds remain safe, and the race is called off. And as we leave the orderly lines of Telcoin, the Maya DAO ecosystem awaits us, ready to reveal the dizzying loops of a re-entrancy attack. While Telcoin wrestled with the hurried pace of front-running, we now drift toward the Maya DAO ecosystem, where the vulnerability lies not in speed, but in a quiet loop of logic. Imagine a bridge connecting different worlds. Here, the root bridge agent stands guard, managing virtual accounts. It allows users to execute tasks across these chains. To ensure fairness, the system patiently tracks the energy used, recording the initial gas and user fee info in its storage, like a toll collector writing your name in a ledger before you cross. But within the function known as anyExecute, a circle begins to form. If a user initiates a specific call, they can re-enter this function before the first visit is complete. A classic re-entrancy. Here is where the memory fails. When the inner journey finishes, the system calls a function to pay for the gas. It settles the debt, and then it deletes the records from the storage. It wipes the slate clean. Do you see the oversight? When the outer call, the original journey, finally tries to pay its toll, the ledger is already blank. The initial gas and user fee info are gone. The system, finding no record of the debt, charges nothing. The execution becomes free. The remedy is a gentle shift in how we remember. Instead of writing these fragile numbers to global storage, we should keep them close, as local variables in memory. This ensures that even if the path loops upon itself, the toll is always remembered, and the debt is always paid. However, sometimes the best fix is to simply move on. As the architects prepare to migrate this entire structure to layer 0, this quiet bridge will be left behind, its lessons learned. And as we leave this bridge to the mists of migration, we remain within the Maya DAO ecosystem to uncover a flaw in pure business logic. While the previous logic spun in circles with re-entrancy, We now drift deeper into the Maya DAO ecosystem to find a quieter stillness. A stillness that comes from running empty. Imagine the AnyCall protocol as a bridge between worlds. To cross it, a user must provide fuel, gas, deposited to pay for the journey. The contract has a duty to manage this fuel. It must pay for the execution on the destination chain, but it must also keep a reserve, a safety net called fallback gas, just in case the transaction needs to revert. But observe the accounting logic, specifically how it handles the excess. When the contract calculates the fees on the root chain, it sees the deposited gas. It assumes, quite innocently, that everything available can be used for execution or added to the accumulated fees. It forgets to save a portion for the return trip. By adding the excessive gas to the fees, or sending it to the recipient on the branch chain, the contract unknowingly spends the budget intended for safety. When the time comes to pay for the fallback, the vault is empty. The withdrawal attempts to pull from a balance that isn't there, leading to a silent, inevitable insolvency. The resolution comes with a shift in priorities. Before we calculate what can be spent, or what can be refunded, we must first gently deduct the fallback gas from the deposit. We set aside the safety reserve before the journey begins. By ensuring this deduction happens first, the protocol guarantees that the vault remains solvent, and the safety net is always there to catch us. And as the ledger balances itself, we turn to the next shadow in the Maya ecosystem, where a denial of service lurks between the delicate difference of signed and unsigned numbers. While the previous logic within the Maya ecosystem suffered from a flaw in its business rules, we remain in this same digital territory for a moment longer. We turn our gaze to the Ulysses Omnichain, specifically the root bridge agent. This agent carries a heavy burden. It manages the gas required to move messages across chains, performing swaps to ensure every transaction is paid for. To do this, it calls upon a Uniswap v3 pool, politely asking to exchange one token for another. The swap function runs, the tokens move, and the pool returns two numbers. These numbers represent the change in balances. But here lies the hidden complexity. In the language of Uniswap, when tokens leave the pool to come to you, the number is negative. It is a matter of perspective. But the bridge agent, in a moment of quiet oversight, forgets to translate this. It takes this negative return value, this signed integer, and attempts to cast it directly into an unsigned integer, a container that can only hold positive things. The mathematics cannot hold. The negative number, when forced into this positive mold without negation, wraps around into a massive, impossible figure. The Safecast library sees this overflow and panics. The transaction reverts. The bridge closes its gates, a complete denial of service. The resolution is gentle, yet vital. We must simply negate the value before we cast it. By placing a minus sign before the negative return, the value flips. It becomes a proper positive amount, fitting perfectly into its unsigned container. And as the bridge begins to flow freely once again, we prepare to look at the index update, where a confusion of decimals and assembly code awaits our attention. While the Maya DAO ecosystem wrestled with the stillness of a denial of service, we gently turn our gaze to the index update protocol. Here we find the price adapters. Think of them as quiet translators, designed to convert the value of tokens that speak different mathematical languages. They use exponential and logarithmic curves to bridge the gap between tokens with many decimal places and those with few. It is a delicate dance of precision, intended to keep prices accurate as they flow from one asset to another. But there is a subtle distortion in the glass. The vulnerability lies deep within the XP-WAD and LN-WAD functions. You see, these mathematical tools were built for a specific resolution, the standard 18 decimals. But when the protocol attempts to sell a high-precision token for a lower-precision one, the mathematics begins to fail. Instead of a graceful exponential curve, the adapters produce a perfect linear line. The resolution is simply too low for the underlying calculation to hold its shape. The price returned becomes incorrect, creating a mismatch between what the market expects and what the code delivers. The curve has flattened. To restore the proper geometry of value, the solution is to increase the room in which the numbers exist. The team changes the scaling factor, lifting it up to the WAD standard. By using scaling factor WAD and applying precise multiplication, the resolution is restored. The linear line bends back into its proper exponential form. And as the pricing curves find their natural arc once more, we drift toward union finance, where we will witness the hurried footsteps of front-running, while the index update protocol wrestled with the rigid precision of decimals and assembly logic. We now turn our gaze to the union finance update. Let us float into a system built on the gentle cycle of lending and borrowing. At the heart of this protocol beats a specific function, the stored exchange rate. It is the pulse that determines the value of shares within the system. Under normal circumstances, this works like a tide. When a borrower returns funds through the repayment function, the total redeemable value of the pool rises. And naturally, the exchange rate rises with it, lifting the value for all liquidity providers. It is a harmonious design. But harmony can be disturbed by those who watch too closely. The vulnerability here is a matter of timing and anticipation. Imagine an observer watching the pending transactions. They see a large repayment about to happen, a repayment that will spike the exchange rate. Because the rate is calculated instantly based on the current balance, this creates an opportunity for a sandwich attack. The attacker, let's call them Bob, slips in right before the repayment. Bob mints tokens at the current lower rate. Then he waits for the repayment to execute, which instantly inflates the value of the pool. And finally, right after the spike, Bob redeems his tokens. He extracts profit not from providing value, but from simply stepping in and out of the pool at the exact right moment. A profit taken from the honest movement of funds. To smooth out these sudden waves, the resolution requires us to look at time differently. The fix suggests implementing a time-weighted average price, or TWAP. Instead of letting the exchange rate jump at every splash in the pool, the protocol learns to value the average depth over time. By smoothing the calculation, the instant profit of the front-runner dissolves, leaving the waters calm once more. And as we watch Union Finance find its balance through the passage of time, the notional protocol approaches on the horizon, bringing with it the storm of a flash loan. While Union Finance wrestled with the frantic energy of front-running, we now turn our attention to the notional protocol. Here we find a quiet vessel known as the balancer vault. Imagine it as a communal garden. Over time, it naturally accumulates rewards, balancer pool tokens, growing slowly, steadily, waiting to be harvested and shared among those who tend the soil. To distribute these fruits, there exists a function called reinvest reward. It is intended to be a moment of abundance for everyone holding a stake. But within this garden, the gate was left unlatched. The reinvest reward function is permissionless, meaning anyone can walk in and trigger the harvest. And here is the subtle oversight. The vault has no memory of time. It does not track how long a user has been there. It does not charge a fee to enter, nor a fee to leave. An opportunist sees this. They can deposit a massive sum, instantly call the reinvest function to claim a share of the rewards they did not earn, and then exit the vault, all within the span of a single transaction. Like a ghost passing through a wall, they steal the harvest without ever truly planting a seed. To restore balance to the garden, we must introduce the concept of patience. We can place a lock on the gate, ensuring only the protocol itself can trigger the reinvestment. Or perhaps we simply ask the vault to remember. By implementing snapshotting, or preventing a user from entering and leaving in the same breath, we ensure that rewards are given only to those who have waited. Friction is introduced, and fairness returns. And as we see how Notional learned to value the passage of time, Hubble Exchange waits in the distance, ready to show us the dizzying loops of re-entrancy. While Notional faced the sudden storm of a flash loan, we now drift toward the Hubble Exchange, where the trouble is not a theft of funds, but a theft of energy. Here, in the VUSD contract, users line up patiently to withdraw their assets. Imagine a quiet queue, where each person waits for the system to process their request, believing the line will move steadily forward, one step at a time. But within this peaceful line, a loop begins to form. You see, the functions for minting with reserves and withdrawing, they lacked a certain guard. They were open to re-entry. A mischievous actor discovered they could withdraw their funds, and in the very moment of receiving them, turn right back around. They could re-enter the system, deposit the gas token, and immediately withdraw again. Over and over. This creates a phantom queue. Honest users, tired and waiting, are forced to spend their own gas processing these empty, repetitive movements, just to reach the front. It is a griefing attack, designed only to waste the community's resources. To silence this noise, the remedy was simple and profound. The developers introduced the non-reentrant modifier to the withdrawal functions. Like a gate that closes firmly behind you, it ensures that once a withdrawal begins, no one can slip back in until the action is fully complete. The loop is broken, and the gas is saved. And as the queue at Hubble begins to move freely once more, we turn our eyes to the Morpho protocol, where a complex question of business logic awaits us. While Hubble Exchange wrestled with the recursive loops of reentrancy, we now turn our gaze to Morpho. Imagine a marketplace designed for harmony. Morpho seeks to match lenders directly with borrowers, creating a peer-to-peer connection where interest rates are optimized, gentle and fair for everyone involved. It is a system built on the idea of matching needs, ensuring that liquidity flows where it is most valued. But within this logic lies a sensitivity to sudden movements. Consider the pool queue. It waits patiently to be matched. An observer, or perhaps an opportunist, can supply a massive amount of liquidity in a single breath, a flash supply. This sudden wave creates peer-to-peer credit lines for every borrower, momentarily satisfying the system's desire for connection. But then, just as quickly, the attacker withdraws. The wave retreats. Yet the rates do not return to their peaceful state. The borrowers are left with a rate that has been artificially reduced, causing them to earn less than the system intended. How do we calm such turbulent waters? The wisdom here suggests looking for these single transaction storms, preventing flash supplies from permanently altering the landscape. The architects at Morpho acknowledged this ripple, and though they chose to wait for a larger refactoring of the queue system, the lesson remains. We must guard against the phantom liquidity that touches our contracts and vanishes before the block is sealed. And as we leave the peer-to-peer currents of Morpho behind, Astaria awaits us, ready to reveal the subtle complexities of business logic. While Morpho wrestled with the subtle intricacies of business logic, we now turn our gaze to Astaria and a quiet oversight within its public vault. Imagine a vault standing sturdy and patient. Within its walls there is a function called Redeem Future Epoch. Its purpose is noble, allowing shares to be transferred back to the vault, redeeming value for a time yet to come. It expects to move these shares from an owner securely and safely. But as we look closer at line 143, we see a moment of confusion in the code. The function prepares to execute a safe transfer. It needs to know who to take the shares from. The logic intends to take them from the owner of the position. But the code mistakenly points to the message sender. Do you see the misalignment? If I were to call this function on your behalf to help you redeem your shares, the contract would try to take the shares from me, the sender, rather than from you, the owner. It is a case of mistaken identity, reaching into the wrong pocket to fulfill a request. The resolution comes with a gentle correction of perspective. We simply guide the code back to the truth. In the first parameter of the transfer call, we replace the message sender with the owner. Now the contract knows exactly where to look. It respects the ownership, transferring shares from the correct source, bringing harmony back to the redemption process. And as we see how Astaria clarified this flow of assets, Liquid Collective waits on the horizon, ready to show us the dangers of validation and share inflation. While Astaria navigated the complex currents of business logic, we now turn our gaze to the Liquid Collective. Here we find a contract known as the Shares Manager. It is a place of exchange. You offer your assets, and in return, the protocol gently mints shares for you, a digital receipt of your contribution. The math seems fair. The number of shares you receive is calculated by taking your deposit, multiplying it by the total supply of shares, and dividing it by the current balance of the vault. A classic equation of proportion. But mathematics can be cruel when the numbers shift unexpectedly. Imagine a user sending a deposit. They expect a fair return, but an attacker is watching the mempool. Just before the user's transaction lands, the attacker slips in. They send raw whey to the contract, perhaps by self-destructing another contract to force the funds in. Why would they do this? By increasing the total asset balance without minting new shares, they inflate the denominator of our equation. Suddenly the pool looks massive, and when the user's deposit is divided by this artificially inflated number, the result becomes so small it vanishes. It rounds down to zero. The user has given their funds, but the contract, blinded by the math, hands them nothing in return. The resolution comes with a gentle boundary. We simply ask the contract to check its work. By adding a requirement that the shares to mint must be greater than zero, we ensure that no contribution goes unrewarded. If the math yields nothing, the transaction simply reverts, keeping the user safe. And as we see how Liquid Collective ensures every deposit counts, the winds shift toward AWA, where we will witness a different kind of grief and a denial of service. While Liquid Collective wrestled with the complexities of share inflation and validation, we now float gently downstream to the EWA protocol. Here we find a feature designed for ease, the permit function. It allows a user to sign an approval off-chain, a silent agreement, waiting to be broadcast to the network. It sits quietly in the code, intended to streamline the user's journey, removing the need for a separate approval transaction. But consider the nature of the mempool. It is a transparent waiting room. When a transaction carrying a permit signature enters this space, it is visible to all. A mischievous observer, or perhaps just a front-running bot, can see this signature. They can copy the arguments and submit the permit themselves. Since the signature is mathematically valid, the network accepts it. The allowance is updated. But here is the tragedy. When the legitimate user's transaction finally attempts to execute, it tries to call permit again. But the unique nonce has already been spent. The signature is now invalid. And so, the entire transaction reverts. A denial of service, born from transparency. The solution is one of acceptance rather than resistance. We wrap the permit call in a try-catch block. If the permit has already been processed by a frontrunner, the code gently acknowledges it and moves on, allowing the rest of the logic to flow like water, uninterrupted. And as we leave the mempool behind, we prepare to enter the structure of Morpho, where a flaw in business logic awaits our quiet observation. While the protocols of AWA struggled against the noise of griefing attacks and the chaotic rush of front-running, we now drift toward the structured geometric halls of Morpho. Imagine a system built upon Aave, designed to optimize, to smooth out the edges of lending and borrowing. Within this architecture there exists a specific control, a switch intended to be protective. It allows the protocol to turn off an asset as collateral. The intention is noble, to prevent liquidators from seizing that specific token during a downturn. It feels like a shield, placed gently over the user's funds. But here is where the logic drifts into a nightmare. When this switch is flipped, the system does not merely protect the asset from being seized. It interprets the action too broadly. In the eyes of Morpho, turning off the asset means it no longer counts as collateral at all. Consider the user, sleeping soundly, believing their loan is healthy. Suddenly the protocol updates. The asset they relied upon to back their loan vanishes from the equation. Its value is ignored. And because their collateral value drops to nothing, the liquidation logic wakes up. The very feature meant to stop seizing triggers the liquidation it sought to prevent. The resolution comes from understanding the flow of time. We realize that such a profound rule cannot be changed while the game is being played. The developers clarified that this feature must be decided at the dawn of the contract, not introduced when users are already relying on it. And as we see how Morpho learned to respect the stability of collateral, we shall remain within these same walls a moment longer, to see how a different flaw in business logic can freeze the system entirely. While the previous logic within Morpho required our attention, we remain within this same protocol for another moment. Let us drift to the exit positions manager. Imagine a peer-to-peer supplier, ready to withdraw their funds and leave the ecosystem. The contract has a mechanism for this, a specific algorithm designed to ensure there is enough liquidity to let the user walk away. It is intended to be a smooth, seamless departure. To finalize this withdrawal, the system attempts one last step. It tries to borrow a specific amount from the underlying pool. Usually this flows like water, but consider a position resting in a very specific, quiet place on Aave. Imagine the debt is high. It has risen above the market's maximum loan-to-value ratio. Yet it is still lower than the liquidation threshold. It is a grey zone, a limbo. When the system tries to borrow to facilitate your exit, the underlying pool refuses because the health factor is too low. But, because it hasn't reached the liquidation threshold, the position cannot be liquidated either. The withdrawal simply fails. The user stands at the door, but the lock will not turn. The resolution here is one of patience and awareness. Because the protocol first launches on Compound, which uses a different metric called collateral factor, this specific shadow does not fall there. But the architects acknowledge the knot, knowing that in complex systems, sometimes the only path is to mitigate the impact, rather than force the lock. And as we see how Morpho navigates these edge cases, our next chapter reveals yet another layer of its business logic, waiting to be understood. While the previous logic error in Morpho created a blockage, a denial of service, we linger within the Morpho protocol for just a moment longer. Here we find a different kind of issue, not a blockage, but a door left slightly ajar when it should have been bolted shut. Imagine the life cycle of a lending market. It is born, it flourishes, and eventually, it must end. In the Morpho governance contract, there is a mechanism to deprecate a market, to gently signal that its time has passed. One would assume that when a market is marked as deprecated, all activity would cease. The lights would go out, the vault would lock. But here is the oversight. The code allowed a market to be marked as deprecated, without actually verifying that borrowing had been disabled. The sign on the door said closed, but the latch was still open. This meant a user could wander into this deprecated market and still execute a borrow. By doing so, they unknowingly stepped into a trap. They could borrow assets, yes, but in doing so, they might immediately become eligible for liquidation. A ghost market, accepting new borrowers only to leave them exposed to the elements. The resolution requires a strict adherence to order. The developers introduced a check, a gentle enforcement of sequence. Now, to deprecate a market, one must first pause the borrowing. If the borrowing state is still active, the request to deprecate simply reverts. The code now ensures that the lock is turned before the closed sign is hung. Morpho must check that markets are truly quiet before they are laid to rest. And as we see how Morpho ensures the state is consistent before moving forward, we drift toward immutable smart contracts, where a mathematical peculiarity, the 164th rule, awaits our tired eyes. And drifting gently away from Morpho's business logic, we arrive at our final destination for the night. The immutable smart contracts. Imagine a bridge, connecting two vast lands of the blockchain. Guarding this bridge is a contract known as the root ERC20 predicate flow rate. It watches over withdrawals, looking for anything suspicious. To keep the bridge safe, it employs a withdrawal queue, a quiet waiting room, if you will, designed to pause large, sudden movements of funds before they can escape. It waits for the flow of tokens to exceed a certain capacity, ready to close the gates if the current runs too fast. But safety mechanisms can sometimes be turned against the very people they are meant to protect. The vulnerability lies in how this gate is triggered. It is a shared threshold. Now, consider a user named Eve, watching Alice try to cross the bridge with her tokens. Eve decides to cause a delay. Eve initiates a transfer just large enough to exceed the expected flow rate for the period. The contract sees the capacity as full. It assumes the worst. And suddenly the withdrawal queue activates, not just for Eve, but for everyone. Alice, who simply wanted to bridge her assets home, finds her transaction pushed into the queue, forced to wait, hindered by a limit that was easily manipulated. To restore the peaceful flow, we must rethink the structure of the queue. Instead of one global gate that closes for everyone, the solution lies in isolation. We explore queues on a per-token basis. If the river of one token floods, it should not stop the stream of another. We also gently advise regularly reviewing these capacity buckets, ensuring that fluctuating values do not accidentally lock the gates. And with that, our journey through these vulnerabilities ends. Rest well. Good night.